So for the vlog this week, I'm going to be focusing on Chomsky, and within this reading, it's actually really interesting because he talks about like two different conceptions of democracy and how the propaganda influences people to determine what kind of democracy they're in, and that there's two classes of citizens who ultimately influence how the democracy is going to come out. So he talks about how there's two different democracies, and there's one that's the public has a means to participate in some meaningful way. And then there's one that the public is barred from managing their own affairs. And when we go back to talking about propaganda, it's this idea that there's this direct thought of most of the world and they want to control the thought of the world. So we see it in Russia, and we definitely see it in Trump, who's been exhibiting it over the last year or so. And it shows the effect of what happens when certain people with certain power have that kind of control. And we saw it in World War I with Hitler. And it brings into question this whole thing that happened with this hysterical Red Scare that was back in the day, and it succeeded in destroying unions and eliminating freedom of the press and political thought, even though the media was really supporting in that. It was just this whole manipulation to form a certain democracy. And it shows that we're able to drive reluctantly population into war by terrifying them and creating what was referred to as eliciting Jagonist fanaticism, which is very similar to a lot of politicians that we see today. We see it in Trump especially, and in most election periods, it's always faced with fear or hope, and whichever one's going to run and how it's going to run. And when we go down to the two classes of citizens, it says the specialized class and the bewildered. So the specialized is somebody who does the thinking and planning, and the bewildered are people who don't participate in the action. So it really shows that the media's control can influence people to understand politics and not understand it, and how people with power have this whole demeanor of a different control, and that control can alter anything that we want to do realistically in creating our democracy.